So welcome to our first webinar as Finance Re. Finance Re, a new company that myself and Sarah have set up recently, and it's a company dedicated to helping insurers to improve their financial reporting and controls with Power BI and also other parts of the Power Platform from Microsoft, also using Office tools and Excel that they use every day, because there's a lot of potential to automate a lot of jobs for finance using those simple tools. So this is our first webinar. We do intend to hold them quite regularly on different topics, and so as it's our first one, bear with us, and hopefully it will go smoothly. The chat is open, so do feel free to ask questions. As it's a webinar, everybody is muted, but if you ask questions in the chat, and maybe at the end, if people have questions, we might be able to unmute people to ask a question, or if it's in the chat, we'll just cover it that way. I would say that although obviously we specialise in insurance, I know there's some people who signed up for the webinar or might be on the call who maybe aren't from an insurance background, and actually most of what we're going to talk about is relevant to the finance function in all sectors, and even the demo, although again is insurance related, I think there'll be a lot of value from people from other industries. So if you are from a different industry outside of insurance, then yes, welcome, and thanks very much for joining, and I hope you get a lot of value out of the webinar. So we'll have a few questions, just a few slides just to sort of set the scene. Sarah will then take us through a case study that she and I both worked on recently at a client, and then we'll get into our demo, which is a demo of reconciling written premium from the policy admin systems to finance. So that'll be a live demo. So that's where obviously some gremlins can creep in, but fingers crossed it will all go smoothly.
Sure, it'll go swimmingly, Simon.
Yeah. We have practiced, so let's see.
Here we go.
Yeah. So hopefully everyone can see the slides. So this is a brief bio. This information is on our website, www.financere.com. So we won't go through this in detail, but Sarah, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sarah Prentice. I've worked in the insurance market for about 30 years. 24 of those were with QBE. I have expert knowledge of Lloyd's Iris, Company Iris, and other systems that are used in the insurance market. I started out as a syndicate accountant with a small team of people, and then moved into the financial systems team, where I was involved in looking at data flows, doing offshoring, that kind of thing. And most recently, I was involved in the finance transformation project that took place at QBE, and was in charge of looking at the rules for the flow of data into finance from all of the transformed data, and also looking at some key reconciliations of that data. That's a summary of me.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And yeah, myself, so not quite as long as Sarah in insurance. I started off and have done a few different things. My main insurance work was starting off with a company called Enstar, where I worked in the finance team. So that's a one-off specialist. Then I went more into sort of consulting, and more recently I've been doing sort of finance transformation projects, working with Sarah at QBE, and also with XL Catlin, now part of AXA XL. So combined, yes, a lot of experience of both working in finance and doing projects within insurance. Yeah. So yeah, I thought this was a picture that kind of represents where I think a lot of finance teams find themselves, and a lot of most finance teams, they're obviously full of very experienced, very well qualified, highly trained people, really capable of delivering huge value to their companies. And I like, if you think of the finance team as a Porsche or a high performing sports car, they should really be capable of great things. But what we see so often is that those people and the team in general can't deliver to their full capability because they're not being used in the right way. And I think this image of the sports car towing a caravan sort of epitomizes where we see ready finance teams, and the caravan sort of represents all the baggage that finance have to deal with and battle through just to do the regular tasks. And I'm sure some of these issues that I've sort of flagged up here, a lot of repetitive Excel-based work, especially in insurance, lots of legacy data issues. So where insurers have grown over time and through acquisition, and no one has ever really got to grips with the old data, or still have processes which cause the finance team problems. And then just the volume of ad hoc requests and one-off sort of bits of work or regulatory reporting that insurance teams have to do in finance. It's all just a big thing that really is a drag on the performance and prevents the finance team from delivering the value that they could be. Maybe some of those you've seen within your own companies. And so really we want to try and reduce that caravan or unhitch it and let our finance teams do what they want to do. So if we think about the attributes of what is a good reconciliation, and this goes for all finance work really. So firstly, no manual data manipulation. We still see so much time wasted every month doing repetitive processes, and there's just no need to do it these days with the technology that we have available. Even using just a simple tool like Power Query, which everyone has within Excel, there's so much potential to automate and just remove any manual tasks. So I think that is the kind of the lowest baseline, that all that manual work just needs to be got rid of, just to remove the scope for error and the time it takes. Also, we need to have sufficient data granularity. So a lot of reconciliations, or what finance would call reconciliations in the past, might be done at a kind of management unit or class of business level. What can be achieved really within Excel. And we'll see when Sarah presents the case study shortly. I mean, that was really the need for that piece of work came out of an audit requirement that a reconciliation that the company was doing needed to be at a policy level. And that's a pretty demanding requirement for a large insurer, and not something that's capable of being done easily in Excel. So so being able to do reconciliations down to very detailed level, and we need the tools to be able to do that. Then the last two I will cover together really, and again it's about moving away from people doing their own pieces of work and manual work in Excel, and starting to have common data sets which we have access to, stored centrally wherever that may be, and then people accessing that and doing their work all on that common data set. This is something that obviously people have been speaking about for years for finance, but I think we're finally getting to the stage now where tools are at that level of maturity where that is becoming a reality. Maybe not for all of the data that finance need to work with, but for particular areas, that there's no need to have everything stored in individual workbooks these days. We can have defined measures, defined calculations, which are set, agreed, held centrally, and then everybody is using the same information. So this is our criteria. I'm sure there's probably others, but if we can meet these with our reconciliations, then I think we've come a long way from where we were doing things manually in Excel. Okay, we'll go on, and now Sarah's going to talk about the case study.
So, as Simon said, this was a case that we were tasked with doing, where the issue was that the finance numbers that were in the GL were not reconciled to the credit control numbers that were being chased. by the credit controllers. And this was because even though both sets of data came from the policy admin system, they went down different paths and different rules were applied to the data as they went along the way. And what happened is that the finance numbers didn't agree to credit control, or it couldn't be proved that they did. Finance could not age their debt because there was no due dates in the data that were in finance arena. And this had been an outstanding audit query for about 5 years, maybe longer. And it was getting quite a lot of heat. So Simon and I were tasked to find a solution to this. Can you just flick to the next slide for me, please, yeah. Simon? Thank you. So what we did is we built a new reconciliation in Power BI with an underlying SQL database, and this covered both the signed and the written data. And along with the data from the credit control arena and the finance arena, we took data directly from the policy admin system. So this enabled us to get lower grain of data, more attributes attached to the data, such as the due dates. And the aging was then going to be possible. The outcome of this was that a reconciliation that hadn't been able to be performed was able to happen monthly, very quickly after the month close. We're able to substantiate the balance sheet at year end, reliably age the debt, which was something that couldn't happen before, and show that even though the finance and credit control numbers looked totally different, they were in fact aligned. And what we did in the solution was we input lots of rules around the data. So all the rules that credit control did manually, all the rules that finance did manually, we automated in Power BI. So it actually built these rules into our solution. So what was left at the end were just the things that didn't agree, which meant that management time could be focused on investigating the things that actually agreed rather than doing the reconciliation itself. And the rules were quite complex and took some time. This solution took about 2 months, Simon, to build. And most of that time, I think, was working out what the rules actually were, not building the solution. It's very quick to build a solution once you know what the question is that you're trying to answer. So yeah, it was very well received. And finally crossed that audit point off the list. So everyone was very happy with that.
Yeah,
and
I think I mean what really was surprising, I think, while we were doing this work was how different rules were being applied. So you can see the different paths. So from the source system, the different path to the credit control output, which is being presented to the board as, you know, what numbers, what premium the credit control team were chasing, and the path that numbers were taken to finance. And it was very inconsistent. So completely different rules being applied in terms of recognition of premium, in terms of what's treated as a binder, where they get their EPIs from. So no consistency at all between the different teams. And I think that's something.
And one of the other main things that was causing a difference was that they didn't take things in unless they were due. So we would take things in on the binder, say, as it was written, and they said, well, it's not payable yet, so therefore we'll take that out of our numbers. So that diverged them even further, caused all sorts of problems.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks, Sarah. So we'll go into our demo. I've just got a slide which sort of sets the scene, really, of what we're going to cover. So it's a written premium reconciliation. So this is a simplified view of what the sort of flow of data might look like in an insurer from the policy admin system. So you see we've got some policy admin systems here. So all the policy details, all the transactions being entered into there. And then these are flowing in. So there's a nightly in this scenario. So if I talk about what happens, remember this is just all the scenario for the demo. Overnight, the information flows into a database, an operational data store, which is conforming all of that data from the policy admin systems into a sort of single conformed database. And then also each night, then that information goes through to some sort of rules engine or accounting engine, which looks at everything that's coming through, looks at the attributes on the transactions and says, right, for this, let's debit this account, credit this account. So generates all the double entry at a very detailed level, and is then posting that to the general ledger. So something similar to what you may have seen in other insurance companies. And what we're saying is that we need to see a reconciliation from the GL back to the ODS, the operational data store, for written premium, so that we can be sure that the written premium coming through to finance actually agrees with what is in the source. A lot of reconciliations that like this would be balance sheet, and the examples there was speaking about premium receivables, obviously a balance sheet reconciliation. For this one, we've actually done a written premium P&L reconciliation, but really the principle is exactly the same. We're comparing the transactions and the values on the two sides. Here, what we're saying is also, because we are reconciling back to the operational data store rather than the individual policy admin systems, we're relying on controls that are already in place from the policy admin systems to the ODS. And obviously that makes the reconciliation much easier, because this is the first point where we've got everything in a conformed structure. So we can, rather than having to build separate feeds from each of these, we can take one feed from here. So that's the scenario. So let me skip out of the slides, and I'll bring up the reconciliation in Power BI. Let me make this full screen so everyone can see. Yep. So this is our demo reconciliation. So this is Power BI. You saw it was this is in the browser. So this is the reconciliation then published to the Power BI service. I expect there's different levels of knowledge about Power BI on the call, so I'll assume very kind of low level. But do feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and I can cover those as I go. So this is our landing screen, and one thing we always like to have is a bit of an information panel, that any user of the report can see, right, well, if I've got any questions or need any help, who are the people I need to contact? I've just put me and Sarah on here, obviously, but you could have, who do I contact if there's data questions? Who do I contact if I've got an issue with Power BI, etc. Plus links to all the documentation. So particularly for the end users, any end user process documents, solution design documents, and copies of files that they might need or might be helpful. We like to put all of that in one kind of information place at the start. And actually, just before getting into the reconciliation, if we go to the data summary page, so we've tried to build this to be a kind of realistic scenario. So obviously we spoke about doing a granular reconciliation, and this is at policy level, and that demands some quite large volumes of data. So you can see here we've got our source data, and we've imported from the ODS. So 1 million in this demonstration, 1 million policy records with 3 million transaction records. And then from the finance side, we've got 6.9 million transactions imported. So we wanted to show that the demo is on a kind of semi-realistic data set. In a real situation, the numbers would probably be higher than this, which Power BI can deal with. But we're not doing a demo over thousands of rows of data. We do have millions of rows of data within this model. And then you can see below. Then we've got some key metrics around dates, etc. To show in the data what the data range is. So this is just for someone who's coming into the model can see, for example, what period is covered. So let me go back to our landing page. So yeah, if we go to our reconciliation summary. So here we can see a summary at the top, and this is, if you remember, our different sources that we're covering in the rec. So we're picking up a source column the data. And then you can see on the left hand side, this is our source number, if you like, so our ODS numbers. You can see we've got our written premium. You can see here an automatic adjustment for binders. So in this scenario, binders are recognised by the finance team over spread over the duration of the binder, which is a common way to recognise written premium on binders. So rather than taking the whole amount, we need to calculate an adjustment. So this is a good example of the sort of complex adjustments that we can put into these reconciliations, because this isn't a particularly straightforward adjustment. So this is being done on the fly. So it's looking at the inception and expiry dates of all the policies that are binders, and then calculating the spread and then working out the adjustment. So quite an involved calculation, which if you were doing that in Excel would obviously be quite demanding to do. Probably if this was a real reconciliation, we probably have a few of these adjustments. There'd obviously probably be one for EPIs, where the written premium is recognised on EPI, which is a much simpler one than this. But I think this is a good example of the sort of things that can be automated, so that it just makes the reconciliation so much easier and meaningful for people. And then on the right hand side, you can see we've got our finance numbers, and then we've got the difference here. So we can see we've got a small difference on two of the sources, and a bigger difference here. If I look at the bottom, so if we look at counts, I can see that for Genius, where we've got the biggest difference, that we've got a lot of policies actually that don't reconcile, just one policy on the other sources, and actually one batch on each source where we've got a problem. So the fact that we've got so many makes me a bit suspicious. So this is an analysis by source, but what I might then think of doing is, well, let's see if I analyze this by batch. So here you can see that we're splitting it by the batches. So the batch is the overnight batch and the source. So here this is the numbers for a batch where we've got the batch ID on both sides, which you'd expect to be the majority if things are working properly. Where we've got a batch ID that's only in the source system, and we can see we have some numbers for one of these, and actually I can see down here there's a batch in the source only, and then where we've got a batch in finance only, and actually this is due to the binders and then posting. So that is fine actually, but this is a problem. So there's a batch in the source only that hasn't made it through to finance. So if I expand this, let's have a look. So this is giving me the batch number. So what I can do, if I right click here, I can drill through to a batch overview. So this is giving me a sort of a summary screen for this batch. So here's the batch ID, the processing date, so I can see straight away, here's my transactions in the source and nothing in finance. Here's the financials. So again, I can see my the numbers for my batch in the source side, nothing in finance. And here's my individual policies in that batch. So obviously if the batch hasn't made it through to finance, then we know there's a problem, and obviously all of these policies don't agree. So yeah, so this batch is obviously not made it through for some reason. So if I just come out of full screen. So one of the nice things in Power BI, just a little feature that's quite good, is this comments. So what I can do is I can add a comment here on this page. So let me send this to Sarah. Had the Genius batch fail again. Investigate, please. And then if I can post this, and then Sarah will get sent an email, and it will have a link on the email, which if she presses on that, it will take her to this exact screen in Power BI. So again, just having that central sort of data that everybody is working with and using is obviously you've got all these benefits of being able to share and work collaboratively rather than people working on reconciliations individually. Okay, so this batch is obviously needs to be resolved, so that should be someone will go off and obviously look at that. But what I can do for the time being, I'm going to make an adjustment in the reconciliation for this, and there's various kind of ways that can be done. You could have a little for people to enter their adjustments. You can have a little app. There's another tool called Power Apps, which is part of the Microsoft platform, which you could have for this. Because we're dealing with finance people, we always find obviously they love to use Excel all the time, and actually it's probably the simplest way to do this sort of work. So you'd normally have a little Excel spreadsheet for adjustments. So let's open my spreadsheet here. So what we're going to say here, so let me make this a bit bigger, sorry. So let's make an adjustment. So what we're going to do, we're going to include, and I want to include something on the finance side, and I can make an adjustment either to individual policies or I can do a whole batch. So obviously this is a batch that's missing, which I want included. I've got the ID copied over here just to be prepared. Here's the Genius batch on this day, so that's the ID. Because it's a batch, these columns are grayed out, not relevant. And we're doing August reconciliation, and if I left this blank, this adjustment would continue in month to month until it was fixed. So I could leave this just in case this batch wasn't fixed for some reason when we come to do the September report, but we'd expect it to be corrected. So I'm going to say we only want to apply this adjustment to this period, and then I can say, yeah, I want to enable this adjustment. So let me save this. Okay, and now if I go back, let's go back to Power BI. Go back to my front screen. And here we've got a little settings tab. Actually, I meant to introduce this at the beginning, but we could say what period we're interested in and also a range. Because this is a P&L reconciliation, we could do it for, obviously, you can be covering any period on the P&L side. So here it's set to the current finance period, but there is an option to do we want to look at everything year to date or even all the prior dates, but obviously all of this is customizable. But yeah, what I want to do, I want to bring in those items that are in the spreadsheet, the adjustments. I just want to refresh those into our Power BI model. So I can just press this little button and that'll go out and that will fetch the data from that Excel and bring it into our model. And that is actually using, for those who are interested, that's using Power Automate. And again, that's part of the Microsoft Power Platform to do that. Let me just hit refresh here and just check that that's updated yet. And I'll let me go back to the full screen as well. Okay, so let's go to our summary page. Actually, let me just minimize that. So now you can see here, we've got a reconciling adjustment on the finance side. So that's that. Yeah, that's the adjustment I just made. I just said, take that batch that's missing. This is the batch ID. Pretend that's in the finance side and treat it like it is there. So obviously now our adjustment has come, our difference has come right down. We still keep it on this column. The batch is obviously in the source only, but the reconciling adjustment takes it down to 0. And actually, if I look at the batch overview, so again, this was the batch sort of summary that we looked at earlier. So you can see here's my reconciling adjustments to my overall numbers balance. But you can see even at the individual policy level, it also knows the formula has been written in such a way that it can calculate the adjustment for those individual policies. So if I looked at any of these individual policies, we'll also have that reconciling adjustment. And I think there was 870 policies, wasn't there, that were in this batch. Obviously, you wouldn't want to have to enter adjustments for all of those individual policies. So doing it this way just makes it so much easier. And I guess, going outside of insurance, whatever grain someone is doing a reconciliation, say it's an order or a customer or something, whatever it is that's failed, you can specify that's the adjustment I want to make. I want to make it at that level, and it will apply to all the grain below. Okay. So great. So our reconciliation is looking much better now. So we've got a small difference. So let's have a look. We've looked at our batches. Let's have a look by policy. Okay, so I can see here again. So this is policy. The policy ID is in both sides or in one or the other side. And again here, so we got some policies that haven't made it through for whatever reason. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go to the next screen. So this is our list basically of policies or batches. We can change the level that we're doing this at, and the difference is it's sorted by difference. So I can see here these are our two culprits. So let's just have a look if I drill into one of these. So I can drill through. Actually, I'll show this. So if we drill through, you see I've got two options. The policy overview, which we'll come on to shortly, or the source data detail. So if I want to investigate a bit more what's the differences on this particular policy, because all the data is stored within the model, I can see here is my source data transactions for the policy. Obviously nothing in finance because we're saying this one hasn't made it through. But obviously this is great if you're investigating and you've got quite a lot of transactions on a policy. Might be just one transaction is not there in finance. I can come here and start to investigate. People can obviously, if they want to, easily export this data into Excel, and they can build up a little workbook to try and work out what's happened with the policy. So we can see actually if I look on so from the source, we're getting the transactions and the policy information. So here, there's no policy information that's come through. So the scenario again for this sort of demo is that if there's a problem with the policy information, when that doesn't come through for some reason into the ODS, that none of the finance transactions come through. So that's kind of just explains why this policy didn't get into our finance records. Let me go back. Okay, so this time I'll go to let's drill through to the policy overview page. And yeah, just like the batch view really. So we can see here's our reconciliation, that we've got the difference, here's the source and finance. Here's the policy, and we can see this information would normally come through from the policy record, but obviously there's no policy record. So that's the clue in this case, what's gone wrong. So I guess what I would do here is probably again send a link to this screen to the person who was entering the data in the source system and say, is there a problem with the policy record? Maybe the policy hasn't been finalized, or there's some bad data, which means it's dropped out somewhere along our flow of data. So let's make another adjustment. So I'll go to back to our spreadsheet. I'll just do one of these two policies. So again, I'm going to include it. So it hasn't made it through to finance, but this one is a policy that we're adjusting. I've got the details over here. So let's take I can't remember if it was the first one. Let's take this one. Save. Back to Power BI. And,
You need to put your amounts in, Simon.
Sorry, Sarah, what's that?
Did you put your amounts in for your adjustment?
No, because the policy is just missing. I'm just saying to include it, so that's
okay,
fine.
so you don't have to do that. You can just put
No,
the
no,
policy.
yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me come here and just refresh the reconciling items again. See, that's refreshed now. Let's go back to our summary. Not yet. It's just there we are. So we can see now we've only got one policy that's the problem. Again, our differences have come down, and then obviously someone would go and look at this. So, and obviously being centrally held, this is available for everybody to see what the situation is with the rec that's being completed for this month. You know, when the team, they can review the dashboard and investigate the remaining differences. It's just hopefully people can see the benefits compared to people doing sort of manual reconciliations by themselves. I think as far as the rec was, the demo of the rec, I think that was everything really to show. So is there any questions in the chat about what we've been through on the rec or in general?
No, there were no questions. I had a question though myself, which was how much data can it hold? I mean, you said that we have a fair amount of data here, but how much can Power BI cope with reasonably?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the answer to a lot of these figures, it depends. So as long as you're sort of selective in how much data and attributes you want to bring through, you know, Power BI can easily be going up to tens of millions of rows, and that is the data imported into Power BI, which is the best way to work with Power BI. It's much faster if you've sort of cached the data within the model. If you're going over to sort of hundreds of millions of rows, then there's different ways to deal with that. It is possible, but you might not pull all the data into Power BI itself. You might just pull in maybe summarized data, and if people need to drill down and see sort of transactional level grain, then that can be collected sort of as needed. So it would send a request to the underlying database and pull that in and display that on the screen. So easily tens of millions of rows, which for most cases is sufficient. I'd say even, you know, you're getting up to 50 million is fine. And when you start getting into the hundreds of millions, then you need to be a bit smarter about how you handle that.
It's sufficient, as you say, for most people.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are no questions in the chat unless anyone has any now.
Actually, one thing to show, which we haven't practiced, but I think is also a good thing to demonstrate. So if I go back to Excel, let's do a new workbook. The other brilliant thing about Power BI is so that the data, so we saw the data is all stored in the Power BI service, and we spoke about getting people away from Excel, but I think people have given up on that battle, especially for finance people. But the great thing is that all the data is accessible easily into Excel from Power BI. So again, people can do their own analysis and investigations, but remember we spoke about having data centrally as well as all the predefined sort of calculations and measures. Well, we can use all of those in Excel. So
there's a question from Reggie now, Simon.
Okay, yep.
In the chat, it says, can you see the chat?
Let me try and just bring it up.
It just says, what is the proposition? You guys come in and build us one of these bespoke. And the answer to that is yes.
Yes, that's right, Reggie. Yeah. So where there's a reconciliation issue or a problem, a bit like the example that Sarah spoke about, the case study, we would come in and do that, and that can be done quite quickly. Like we said, with the example we looked at, the hardest part was no one knew what the rules should be, or what the adjustments should be. But if there's a good existing reconciliation, then that can be done quite quickly.
We're in another question, I think, from Reggie.
Yeah. So just while that's coming up, I'll just carry on with this this Excel part. So in Excel,
it says your data Power BI experts linked to insurance.
That's right.
Yes.
We like to think so.
Yeah.
Okay. So in Excel here, so I say get data, I can say from Power BI. And then this will show all of the data sets that I have access to. So as a finance person, I might be one of the people who works on that reconciliation, but there might be lots of other things that I work on as well. Which I've got two here. So, but let's just pick one of these. So you can see here, here's my data set, and straight away, so I can see they've improved this actually. I can see what the tables are there, and also what reports are using that data set.
That's quite small, that, Simon.
Okay, yes. Let me try and make it bigger. I think that will make this bit bigger. I don't know if I can make this part bigger, but you can see, so I can just do a pivot table over all that data that's in the model. So, and what Excel will send requests to Power BI, and then it gets the data back into the pivot table. So and it's pretty fast. Maybe not as fast as pivoting over data that's within Excel, but it does work extremely well. And the workbook would be extremely small. So let's say it comes to the year-end audit, and the auditors are asking for, we want to see the differences for a particular company or entity. So let me just collapse all these tables. So these are all the tables in our model. So let's say batches. So we want the batch ID. Actually, there'll be a lot of those. Well, let's put that in there. So yeah, here's our batches, and then what's our final difference by batch. So let's see, to remember where I put the I can use the search here, difference. Or maybe, yeah, so here's what's the number of policies that we've got differences on, for example. So drag that into the values. You can see here it's running a query, and Excel is sending this request back to Power BI, and then we'll get that back into the pivot table. I probably should have filtered this down a little bit, so I've run it for every batch. You're better to filter it maybe by some entities or something first, but yeah, so having that central data set, or data sets that finance can just connect to in Excel, it's just great. And even where Power BI is quite sort of integrated into companies, actually using the data within Excel and linking to the Power BI data sets is as big a benefit to finance as having all the nice dashboards and reports that we've looked at.
Yeah. I mean, Reggie's point, he said, are we linked to insurance? Yes, we are, but it doesn't mean that we can only do the solutions for insurance. That's just where our knowledge is. But, reconciliation is a reconciliation anywhere, right? It doesn't matter. Okay, another question.
Yeah. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. There's no silly questions.
Oh.
Yep. I'll give you a call, Reggie. Yeah. Let's maybe on LinkedIn. I'll send you a note. Great. Okay, so it looks like there's no questions. I mean, there will be a recording of the demo, which we'll put onto our website on our blog page. So it looks like there's a couple of questions coming in. So
Okay.
Satya, how does it work with very old data stack? Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, Power BI, the connectivity now with sort of set connectors is incredible. Actually, if I go to where's the best way to show this? Power BI. So this is Power BI in the cloud. So this is the web version of Power BI. You normally there's a desktop tool in which you build these reports, but I can show you here. So let me go to a workspace. And if I want, you can build stuff online. So if I build what's called a data flow, let me do a new data flow. And it'll show me all the predefined connectors for Power BI. This is online. I think the desktop version has probably got even more options. So you can see there's connectivity to nearly everything. Actually, the example we went through, Sarah, is that's all we were connecting back to Lloyd's Iris IBM database. So you know, there's always ways to connect to the old source data. I don't think that was a modern database.
No, absolutely not.
That.
No.
I'll probably dread to think how old that was. So yeah, I mean, there's always ways to get the data into Power BI. It's very, very flexible like that. Thanks for the question, Satya. Yeah, thank you, Madhu. I met Madhu recently at the Finance for Power BI conference in London, which was good.
A great way to spend a Saturday afternoon. Yeah. All day Saturday, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I don't know if Madhu's got a question, but as I said, we will be sharing the recording, and I think most of the people on the call, you probably got informed of the webinar by on LinkedIn. So feel free just to get in touch with us on LinkedIn. Any questions, it doesn't matter, or things that you've thought about that you'd like to know more details. Also, all our contact details are on our website. So it's let me just show you, www.financeRe. So finance-re.com. And if we go to our team picture, there's our emails and our mobile numbers underneath, and a general contact details here, so you can send us a message. So yeah, please feel free to get in touch. And thanks for just bearing with us on our first webinar. We are hoping to do them fairly frequently. When we've got some good content that we think will be interesting for people, we'll organise some more.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good evening. Yeah.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.